Taycan. I've only seen it in photos so far, just like many other electric cars that hit the internet every day. But now that Porsche's made in electric, we've got to sit up and take notice.
Because you see, it is one of the few brands that don't need to market driving pleasure. It is simply synonymous with it. So when they do an electric, you're bound to be intrigued to find out if it still feels like a Porsche.
We've had these kind of questions in the past too, when Porsche did a four-door coupe or a high-riding SUV. Of course, not everything is a 911, but Porsche have managed to set themselves apart even in these body styles. So can the Taycan do it too when the world shifts to batteries and motors? Let's find out.
With conventional radiator grills becoming obsolete in EVs, car designers have often struggled to make the face of an electric look as handsome or convincing as the cars we have grown up with. But Porsche has never had to do big grills on the front of their sports cars. So the classic shape and the design of the 911 morphed easily onto the Taycan as well. The Taycan has a clean wedge shape and the bodywork appears to melt over the wheels, creating some sensuous looking lines and haunches. Despite the four doors, the Taycan looks more like a stretched 911 than an electrified Panamera. That comes courtesy of a narrower glass house and a more exaggerated tail section, which makes the tail look sharper, while the balanced visual distribution prevents it from looking as cab rearward as the Panamera. There are charging sockets above both the front wheel arches, respectively for the AC and the DC fast chargers.
But to go nitpicking, after seeing how cool that was, this button for opening the boot seems just too conventional.
Other unique touches include the air curtains integrated along the headlights and a tail that has a glass window with the Porsche letters and a detailing that looks like a printed circuit board. Also, this is a sports car that looks so good even without any tailpipes.
There's no mistaking this Porsche for any other brand of car. All the cuts, creases, surfaces, the flat underbody, the flat wheels, they all contribute to making the Taycan one of the most aerodynamic cars that Porsche has ever built.
While the Taycan's exterior echoes the styling cues from Porsche's past, the cabin takes a glimpse into the future.
If you're worried that you spend too much time looking at screens, the Taycan is going to add to that. A dashboard full of screens, seamless screens. It's not restricted to concept cars anymore. The Taycan has 4 screens just at the front. Apart from the digital instrumentation and the infotainment, there's an additional screen for the co-passenger and a screen that controls the AC, the bonnet, the boot. It's all right here. It essentially replaces all the controls, or at least most of the controls that you can think of.
Apart from the digital instrumentation and infotainment, the Taycan also gets a screen for the co-passenger to fiddle around on and get information about the media and the navigation.
Considering that this is not a dashboard that's tilted towards the driver, it is within easy reach of the passenger as well. So that screen seems a bit superfluous. Maybe that is the reason why it's also optional equipment. And as you would expect, the screen on the center console will not only let you control the air conditioning, but it will also tell you the battery status. You can also pre-cool or preheat the cabin. It will also let you open the electronically controlled boot or the bonnet, and also open the charging sockets on either side. But at the same time, the screen on top will give you additional controls for the AC. Like for example, these AC vents, you can't mechanically adjust them. You have to do it via the screen. Of course, the UI for it is quite intuitive, but I'm not sure. You would still have to take your eyes off the road to do it. This one, old school, pretty simple. I don't know why they went with this instead.
The driving position is driver focus as you would expect, and all the controls that matter are in the right places. Despite the expensive hardware that goes into a performance EV like this, the Taycan doesn't use low-rent materials anywhere. Save for the screen on the center console, which feels a bit low resolution, the fit and finish in the rest of the cabin feels expensive. Even the instrumentation is a touchscreen only along the edges and lets you select driving modes or make adjustments to the lighting. While the screens make the cabin look all digital and space age, A riveted design on the steering spokes or the rotary knob for the mode selector and the signature analog clock on the dashboard seem like an ode to the mechanical age.
But you've got to miss that analog tachometer. It's a signature that sits at the center of the instrumentation on all the IC engine Porsches. I'm sure during the development process of the Taycan, they had long meetings contemplating what could replace that rev counter. I'm not sure what would suffice. An analog speedometer maybe?
Rev counters also help drivers plan their gear shifts, which makes them obsolete on EVs. But on the topic of shifting, the Taycan gets a 2-speed transmission. That helps the Taycan manage a brisk acceleration as well as relaxed highway cruising. The Taycan with its single-decker 79.3 kWh battery claims a range of around 300 km when driven in the range mode and will ferry 4 adults in comfort.
The contouring on the rear seats is almost as good as those on the front, and that is what makes it quite comfortable as well. Of course, because of this contouring, you can only have 2 adults at the back and long distance journeys shouldn't be a problem. For my frame and my height of 5'8", this is actually quite comfortable. But you do sit in a bit of a knees up position, so anyone taller than me might have a bit of a problem with the overall comfort. Also, the headroom will come at a premium for those who are taller than 6 feet. This is also a big piece of glass. It's a panoramic sunroof, but it's also a polarized glass, so it also sort of cuts down on the sunlight. But during the warmer months, it is going to get warmer in this cabin. So you simply just unlock the car, get into the car, and everything's waiting for you. All you have to do is just put it into drive. There's no ignition, of course, so nothing really comes to life in a very animated manner the way it would on all the previous Porsches. So no sounds, nothing. Just start driving. The selector is right here on the dashboard. It is that shaver kind of a selector again, and it is on the dashboard, and that is what helps liberate more space here on the tail console. Push it into drive and you're silently off. Now, while this big glass roof fills up the cabin with a lot of natural light that makes it feel pleasantly roomy for all the 4 occupants, the driver's seat, you have a dashboard, the tunnel console, all the switches, even the footwell that nicely wraps around the driver's seat. It gives you that cocoon feeling that you want in a sports car.
The Taycan you see here is the base model and is arguably the one to buy if you're looking for a battery-powered Porsche. Unlike its turbo or 4S derivatives, the base-spec Taycan uses a single electric motor that only powers the rear wheels, and with the battery sitting in the floor as a load-bearing component of the chassis.
So think of it to be something like a mid-engine rear-wheel drive car. But then with a 2-ton weight, it's very much like a performance SUV. But on the move, out on the road, you will not really feel that kind of weight. You will literally have to read the spec sheet to believe that the car is so heavy. Otherwise, it feels nice and agile. It is quite quick around the bends, of course, but the agility is comparable to something like the previous generation Panamera GTS. And achieving that is a big feat. And then, like a typical Porsche, you will have to literally push the car very hard around the bends with all those electronics turned off to make it twitch and slide. That is how good the dynamics are inherently.
And while the brochure makes the rear-wheel drive setup sound more basic compared to the twin-motor Taycan 4S, the rear-wheel drive is certainly a lot more fun and allows you to be more aggressive with the front axle and turn in sharply. Like most sports cars, you would have to be careful over bumps and through potholes, but like most Porsches, the ride is supple, which is astonishing given the weight that this car carries in its belly. The Taycan also rides on tires with thicker sidewalls than the low pros on the equivalent 911s and Panameras, and that adds a layer of cushioning to the ride.
As you start making more use of the steering wheel, you realize how nice, flat and stiff this chassis is. And then there is the air suspension, of course, so you can tweak things further. You can make it tighter for tighter bends like these, depending on your driving style, whatever you like. You can also lift the suspension, lift the bodywork if you want to negotiate speed bumps, or you can lower it to get that faster turn in, to get tighter lines, cleaner lines through the corners.
Instead of going with the typical single-pedal driving touted by most EVs, Porsche has nicely married the regenerative as well as the physical braking into the brake pedal itself. That way you can have the motor help you cut speeds while cruising and only summon the discs and the pads when you press the pedal hard or turn off regenerative braking, and only resort to the physical brakes when you want more connect and feel from the driving pedals. Speaking of feel, the Taycan's 326 PS permanent magnet synchronous motor has a linear power delivery, but the on-tap performance means that the car feels brisk overall. Porsche lets you choose a larger battery too, a 93.4 kWh, which adds about 76 kilos. It enhances the range, but the acceleration or the top speed remain unchanged. With the launch control function, the base Taycan manages a 0 to 100 sprint in about 5.4 seconds, which isn't as quick as a 718 Cayman, which does it in under 5 seconds. 200 km an hour comes up in under 18 seconds, while the top speed is restricted to 230 km an hour.
Honestly, 5.4 seconds, 0 to 100, it's quick. It's quick enough to not let you feel the difference between a Cayman and a Taycan. It's quick enough to blur the surroundings in your peripheral vision. But it's not quick enough when your peripheral vision is also seeing a Porsche logo right here on the steering wheel. You expect it to be rapid, you expect it to be a lot sprightlier, and that it doesn't do. Add to it the fact that there is absolutely nothing that is tickling your oral sensations. Of course, there is that electronic sports sound, but it's not the same thing. It's not the same as a 911. So if I had to sum up the difference between a Taycan and a 911, it would be like having to pick between a choice of two partners, only one of whom knows how to arouse all your senses. And the 911, that does that for me. Of course, this statement of mine comes from all the choices that people like you and I have made over the years, the kind of stuff that we've fallen in love with about automobiles. But looking at the future, it is cars like the Taycan which will pick up the mantle of keeping driving enthusiasts like us enticed and happy. Porsche agree that it's not going to be the same, but at the same time, the Taycan proves that it's going to be worthwhile. This is the future of the sports car.